Surviving the Storm. Lives Changed by the Southeast Tornado Outbreak of May 2025. Note: for privacy reasons, the names of individuals in this story have been changed, but the events and places described are based on real occurrences from the May 2025 tornado outbreak in the southeastern United States. The morning of May 17, 2025, dawned with an unusual stillness over Cullman, Alabama. Michael Walters, a 47-year-old construction supervisor and lifelong resident, noticed it immediately. The air felt heavy, almost electric, as he stood on his front porch, sipping coffee. 2 decades of living through Alabama Springs had taught him to recognize the warning signs. "Something's brewing," he told his wife Rebecca, who was hurrying their 2 teenagers through breakfast. "Better make sure the storm shelter's ready." Rebecca nodded absently, more concerned with getting 16-year-old Emma to her softball tournament and 14-year-old Jason to his friend's house. The weather app on her phone showed storms, but severe weather warnings were part of spring in Alabama. The National Weather Service had issued a slight risk for their area, nothing that would typically disrupt their weekend plans. By noon, that slight risk had escalated to a PDS warning, particularly dangerous situation, as a powerful cold front collided with the warm, moist Gulf air that had been building over the southeast for days. The system was intensifying rapidly, much faster than meteorologists had initially predicted. At the National Weather Service office in Birmingham, meteorologist Sarah Reeves watched with growing concern as the radar imagery evolved. "This is setting up to be a major outbreak," she told her colleagues. "The wind shear values are off the charts." Sarah had been tracking severe weather in Alabama for 15 years, but something about today's atmospheric conditions troubled her deeply. The CAPE values, convective available potential energy, a measure of atmospheric instability, were reaching levels she'd rarely seen. The jet stream was positioned perfectly to enhance rotation in any storms that formed. It was, as meteorologists sometimes grimly joke, a perfect day to chase tornadoes, except Sarah knew the human cost that would follow. She picked up the phone to call her counterparts in Mississippi, Georgia, and Tennessee. "We need to coordinate messaging," she told them. "This isn't just another severe weather day." The first tornado touched down at 2:13 p.m. in western Alabama, near the Mississippi border. It was just the beginning. 80 miles east in the town of Huntsville, elementary school teacher Caroline Mitchell was helping set up for a community fundraiser at the local high school gymnasium. Outside, the skies had turned an eerie shade of green-gray. Caroline's phone buzzed with a tornado warning. She'd seen dozens of these alerts over the years, but something about the urgent language made her pause. "Take cover now. Tornado emergency. Life-threatening situation." "We need to get everyone to shelter," she told the principal, showing him her phone. The school's shelter was designed to hold 300 people. Nearly 500 were present for the fundraiser. The principal hesitated. "If we call it off, we lose the whole day's donations for the hospital wing." Caroline looked him directly in the eyes. "If we don't, we might lose a lot more." Caroline had grown up in Moore, Oklahoma. She was only 11 when the devastating 1999 tornado tore through her hometown. Her family had survived in a storm shelter, but their neighbors, who had delayed seeking shelter, hadn't. That memory had shaped her entire life, leading her to become an advocate for tornado preparedness in Huntsville after moving there 8 years ago. "Trust me," she added quietly. "I've seen what happens when people wait too long." The power flickered once, then again. Then came the sound, the one every Southerner dreads, like a freight train bearing down on them. Decision made, the principal grabbed the microphone. "Everyone move calmly to the shelter area now. This is not a drill." The gymnasium's metal roof began to shudder as people hurried toward the reinforced hallways at the center of the building. Caroline helped usher the elderly and families with small children, counting heads as they passed. 200, 250, she murmured to herself. The lights went out completely. "Keep moving by the light of your phones," she shouted over the increasing roar. Within the crowd, 8-year-old Lily Baker clutched her mother's hand tightly as they moved with the rush of people. Lily had never experienced a tornado before. Her family had moved from California just 3 months ago. The noise terrified her, but she remembered what Ms. Mitchell had taught during their school tornado drill last month. Stay calm, stay low, cover your head. The last family had barely made it through the shelter doors when the gymnasium roof peeled away like the lid of a sardine can. The sound was deafening, a chaotic symphony of tearing metal, shattering glass, and the vacuum-like roar of the twister. Inside the shelter, people huddled together in the darkness. Children cried, adults prayed. Caroline led a group of younger kids in singing "This Little Light of Mine," her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. Lily's mother, Dana Baker, a nurse at Huntsville Medical Center, began checking on those around them. An elderly man was hyperventilating. She guided him through breathing exercises. A pregnant woman was experiencing contractions. Dana helped her lie on her side, timing the intervals between contractions. "Are you a doctor?" the woman asked between grimaces. "Nurse," Dana replied. "Labor and delivery, actually. You're in good hands." The tornado passed directly over Huntsville High School, a massive EF4 with winds exceeding 170 miles per hour. The gymnasium was obliterated, along with the science wing and administrative offices. But in the shelter, 497 people survived without a single serious injury. When they finally emerged into the twilight, the landscape had been transformed. Where a community had stood that morning, now lay a tangled maze of debris and downed power lines. The tornado had carved a path 300 yards wide through the heart of Huntsville. "My house is over there," whispered an elderly man standing next to Caroline, pointing toward a neighborhood that no longer existed. Or it was. The man was Harold Jenkins, 82, a Korean War veteran who had lived in the same house for 57 years. Every possession, every photograph, every memento of his late wife, gone in less than 2 minutes. Caroline placed her hand gently on his trembling shoulder. "You're alive, Mr. Jenkins. We'll help you rebuild." As twilight deepened into night, emergency vehicles began arriving, their lights casting surreal red and blue patterns across the wreckage. Caroline organized the survivors into groups based on their needs. Those requiring medical attention, those needing immediate shelter, those with undamaged homes who could take in neighbors. Dana Baker, still in teacher mode despite her exhaustion, rounded up the children and organized a makeshift daycare area in one of the few undamaged classrooms, allowing parents to help with emergency efforts or process insurance claims on their phones. Among the volunteers was Eric Donovan, a construction worker who had moved to Huntsville just 6 months earlier. He had no local family, few friends, and had been considering moving back north. But as he helped clear debris and search for survivors, something shifted in his perspective. "I came here looking for work," he told Caroline as they distributed water bottles. "Looks like I found my purpose instead." As night fell across Alabama, the storm system showed no signs of weakening. It continued its relentless march eastward, spawning at least 17 confirmed tornadoes across Alabama, Georgia, and into the Carolinas. In rural Jackson County, Georgia, the Morton family huddled in their bathtub, a mattress pulled over them as protection. Their mobile home stood at the edge of a cotton field that had belonged to David Morton's family for generations. "I think it's passing," Eliza Morton whispered to her husband as the roaring diminished. Their 5-year-old son, Tyler, was squeezed between them, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. The Mortons had debated evacuating earlier that day. David's sister in Athens had called, urging them to drive the 40 miles to her house with its basement. But the family's old pickup had been running rough, and David worried about breaking down on the highway during the storm. "We'll be fine," he had assured Eliza. "We've weathered worse." But as the sky darkened that afternoon, both recognized this storm was different. David had reinforced their bathroom the previous year, adding extra studs to the walls and a thicker door, small measures that might make the difference between life and death in a region where few mobile homes had dedicated storm shelters. Before David could respond to Eliza's hopeful words, the pressure dropped so suddenly that their ears popped painfully. Then came the impact. Their entire home lifted, turned, and was torn apart around them. Eliza would later recall only fragments: the bathtub spinning like a carnival ride, her son's screams, the sensation of rain hitting her face horizontally, the mattress ripping away, her husband's hand desperately clutching hers, then gone. She and Tyler were found the 200 yards from where their home had stood, the porcelain bathtub somehow still intact around them, though cracked down the center. Both suffered broken bones and lacerations. David Morton's body was recovered 2 days later, nearly half a mile away. "He saved us," Eliza told rescue workers. "He held the mattress down as long as he could." The paramedic who treated Eliza and Tyler was Jessica Rivera, a 10-year veteran of emergency services. As she stabilized Eliza's fractured arm, Jessica maintained a calm, reassuring presence despite her own exhaustion. This was her 4th straight tornado response in 24 hours, and the devastation was unlike anything she'd seen in her career. "You're going to be okay," she told Eliza, though the words felt hollow against the knowledge that Eliza's husband was still missing. "Your son needs you to be strong right now." Tyler, despite his young age and injuries, seemed most concerned about his dinosaur toy. "Rex protects me," he kept saying, clutching the worn plush Tyrannosaurus. Jessica made a mental note to ensure the toy stayed with the boy throughout treatment. In her experience, these small comforts became psychological lifelines for children experiencing trauma. "Rex did a good job," she assured Tyler as she carefully splinted his broken wrist. "And we're going to take good care of both of you." As the ambulance navigated debris-strewn roads toward Northeast Georgia Medical Center in Gainesville, Jessica radioed ahead with their status. The hospital was already operating beyond capacity, with injury victims arriving from multiple counties. "Set up a pediatric trauma team for the boy," she instructed, "and contact mental health services for both. They've lost everything." Throughout the night, Jessica and her colleagues transported dozens of injured survivors. Some would recover fully, others faced months of rehabilitation. And for 17 families across Jackson County, there would be no recovery, only the painful process of burying loved ones and somehow finding a way forward. Dawn on Sunday, May 18th, revealed the storm system's devastating path. In Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, communities awakened to landscapes transformed by nature's fury. The damage was estimated at over $3 billion. The human toll was still being calculated. In Atlanta, the Emergency Management Agency established a crisis center At the Georgia World Congress Center, cots lined the exhibition halls. Volunteers distributed water, food, and charging stations for phones. Medical teams treated the injured. And everywhere, people searched for information about missing loved ones. Dr. James Cooper, who had been on duty at Piedmont Atlanta Hospital for 36 hours straight, moved among the evacuees, checking bandages and administering tetanus shots. "I've worked hurricane relief in Florida and earthquake response in Haiti," he told a reporter. "But there's something particularly devastating about tornadoes. They're so selective. One house stands untouched while the neighbor's is completely gone." Dr. Cooper had seen the randomness of tornado damage in the injuries he'd treated. A toddler without a scratch found in the debris of a completely destroyed house. An adult with critical injuries from a home that appeared mostly intact. The psychological impact was equally random and severe. Survivors questioning why they had been spared when others weren't. "The physical wounds will heal faster than the invisible ones," he told his medical students during a brief teaching moment. "Watch for signs of acute stress disorder, especially in children. This will evolve into PTSD for many victims if we don't intervene early." Among the evacuees was Raymond Davis, a 73-year-old retired postal worker from Griffin, Georgia. His neighborhood had taken a direct hit from an EF3 tornado. His house of 40 years was gone, but his decades of emergency preparedness had saved his life. "Been storing water and canned goods since the 70s, he told Dr. Cooper as his blood pressure was checked. "Wife used to tease me about it. 'Ray,' she'd say, 'what are you preparing for?' 'Well, this, I guess.'" Raymond had converted a closet under his stairwell into a reinforced safe room after a close call during a 1994 tornado. He'd stocked it methodically: water, non-perishable food, first aid supplies, battery-powered radio, flashlights. When the warning came, he had 18 minutes to take shelter before the tornado struck. Those 18 minutes and decades of preparation had made the difference between life and death. "My neighbors thought I was paranoid," Raymond continued, wincing as Dr. Cooper cleaned a laceration on his forehead. "The Millers next door. They didn't make it." Dr. Cooper paused, looking at the elderly man with newfound respect. "You might consider giving a talk about preparation once things settle down. People would listen to you now." Raymond's story was not unique. Throughout the evacuation centers, tales of both preparation and improvisation emerged. The Thompson family of Noonan had practiced tornado drills monthly since moving to Georgia from California. The Rodriguez family survived by sheltering in a culvert when the tornado struck while they were driving on Interstate 85. The Williams children, home alone when the warning sirens sounded, followed the safety plan their parents had drilled into them, sheltering in their home's interior bathroom. "It's not luck," FEMA Representative Maria Chen told reporters at a press conference in Atlanta. "It's preparation meeting opportunity. The communities that had strong warning systems, practiced drills, and accessible shelters saw significantly lower casualty rates." Maria had joined FEMA after losing her home to Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico in 2017. The experience had transformed her from victim to advocate, and she had dedicated her career to improving disaster preparedness in vulnerable communities. "What we're seeing now is the result of years of investment in some areas and years of neglect in others," she continued, her voice reflecting both frustration and determination. "The disparity in casualty rates between communities with robust early warning systems and those without is unacceptable." Among those listening intently to Maria's press conference was State Senator Robert Caldwell. As chair of the Public Safety Committee, He had repeatedly blocked bills that would have funded tornado shelters in mobile home communities, citing budget constraints and personal responsibility. Now, surveying the devastation and hearing the stories of lives saved by proper shelter and lives lost without it, he felt the weight of those decisions. The randomness of tornado strikes made it easy to dismiss preparedness as unnecessary expense, until it wasn't. "I'd like to meet with you privately," he told Maria after the press conference. "I think it's time we revisited our state's emergency preparedness funding." By Monday morning, the death toll stood at 27. Thousands were displaced. Power remained out for over 300,000 homes across the Southeast. But as the immediate danger passed, something else emerged from the devastation: the resilience that has defined the American South through countless disasters. In Cullman, Alabama, Michael Walters, whose own home had survived with only minor damage, organized his construction crew to help secure damaged buildings before the next wave of storms forecast for Tuesday. "We can't stop the weather," he told his team as they gathered in the pre-dawn light, tools in hand. "But we can be ready for it, and we can help each other recover." Michael had almost lost his own father to a tornado in 1989. That experience had shaped his approach to construction, building beyond code requirements, especially for structural integrity during high winds. His own home had survived because of the hurricane straps and reinforced safe room he'd installed, measures that cost less than $5,000 but were worth infinitely more. His crew of 12 had swelled to nearly 50 volunteers by mid-morning. They moved methodically through the hardest-hit neighborhoods, tarping roofs, boarding windows, and salvaging possessions. Among the volunteers was Amir Khan, a software engineer who had moved to Cullman from Chicago just 3 months earlier. His neighbors had barely spoken to him before the tornado. Now they worked alongside him, sharing water bottles and stories as they cleared debris. "I was thinking of moving back north," Amir told Michael during a brief water break. "Didn't feel like I belonged here, but this..." He gestured around at the community effort. "This changes things." Michael nodded, understanding the sentiment perfectly. "Southerners can be standoffish until you need help or they need help. Then you find out who we really are." At what remained of the First Baptist Church, they found Pastor Robert Johnson attempting to recover hymnals and Bibles from the debris. "Sunday service is still on," the pastor insisted, despite the fact that only one wall of his church remained standing. "Just might be a bit more open air than usual." Pastor Johnson, a former carpenter, had been leading First Baptist for 17 years. More than just a spiritual leader, he had established the church as a community resource center, offering financial counseling, addiction support groups, and emergency assistance. The destruction of the building wouldn't change that mission. It would amplify it. By noon, Michael's volunteers had erected a large tent in the church parking lot. Portable generators provided power for fans against the muggy May heat. Church members arrived with folding chairs and food to share. "This isn't the first tornado to hit Cullman, and it won't be the last," Pastor Johnson told his impromptu congregation as they gathered under the tent. "But each time we learn. Each time we rebuild stronger." The service became an improvised community meeting. People shared resources. "I have extra bedrooms." "My generator can power your insulin refrigerator." "My sister in Huntsville can take 3 families for as long as needed." A spontaneous volunteer coordination center emerged, with Michael's construction expertise guiding the immediate rebuilding efforts, and Pastor Johnson's community connections ensuring that help reached those most in need. By sunset, temporary repairs had secured dozens of damaged homes against the approaching weather. Vulnerable residents had been relocated to sturdy shelters. Emergency supply chains had been established. A community that had awakened in shock and despair ended the day with purpose and determination. In Griffin, Georgia, 16-year-old Zoe Anderson had lost her home and nearly everything she owned. Her family was safe at her grandmother's house outside the damage zone, but Zoe couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness. "I need to do something," she told her mother as they sorted through the few possessions they'd recovered. Zoe, a high school junior with aspirations of studying computer science at Georgia Tech, had always approached problems through technology. 2 years earlier, she had created an app to coordinate volunteers for her school's community service program, a simple interface that matched needs with resources. Using her smartphone, miraculously undamaged, Zoe created a similar mapping tool that matched tornado survivors with specific needs to volunteers who could help. Need bottled water. The map showed where it was being distributed. Have a chainsaw and free time. The map directed you to streets with fallen trees. While her mother made phone calls to insurance adjusters and FEMA representatives, Zoe coded through the night, fueled by determination and the energy drinks her grandmother quietly supplied, despite her mother's objections. By morning, she had a functional prototype. She shared it with her computer science teacher, who helped optimize the code and connected her with former students now working in tech. ZoeHelps.org went from concept to functioning website in less than 24 hours, with help from Zoe's high school computer science club, who collaborated remotely. By Tuesday morning, over 5,000 people were using the platform across 3 states. Georgia Tech's computer science department noticed the site's rapidly growing traffic and offered server space and technical support. Local news covered the story, marveling at how a teenage tornado victim had created a solution that emergency management professionals hadn't implemented. CNN featured Zoe's story on Tuesday night. By Wednesday, tech companies were calling with offers to scale her platform for future disasters. "I just wanted to feel useful," she told the reporter, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Everyone has something they can contribute. Behind Zoe's humble response lay a profound truth that was emerging across the disaster zone. Recovery wasn't just about rebuilding structures, but about rebuilding agency. Victims who found ways to contribute, whether through physical labor, emotional support, or technological innovation, recovered more quickly, psychologically, than those who remained passive recipients of aid. Dr. Lisa Mendez, a disaster psychologist volunteering with the Red Cross, observed this pattern repeatedly. "The most powerful intervention we can offer isn't counseling, though that's important," she explained to a group of volunteers. "It's helping people rediscover their capacity to help others. That's where healing begins." As Tuesday arrived, the Southeast prepared for the next round of severe weather. This time, however, communities were better prepared. In Hansaville, where Caroline Mitchell had helped save nearly 500 lives at the high school, emergency officials had established a text alert system that reached 94% of residents. Temporary shelters had been identified and communicated. Volunteers had cleared emergency routes of debris. Caroline herself had barely slept, moving between emergency planning meetings and checking on families from her school. As a 5th-grade teacher, she felt responsible for her students' physical and emotional well-being, even outside the classroom. One such student was Marcus Bell, whose family home had been completely destroyed. Caroline found them sheltering in a relative's already crowded apartment, 9 people sharing a 2-bedroom space. "Ms. Mitchell!" Marcus exclaimed when he saw her at the door, momentarily forgetting the tragedy as he hugged his favorite teacher. Caroline had brought not just emergency supplies, but also Marcus's school backpack, recovered from the debris of his home, containing his prized collection of science fair medals. "I thought these were gone forever," his mother whispered, tears forming as she held the slightly bent medals. Such small gestures of continuity, preserving connections to life before the disaster, were happening throughout the affected communities. First responders returning family photos, volunteers salvaging Christmas ornaments, neighbors recovering pets, each item representing a thread of normalcy in lives otherwise torn apart. "We're ready," Caroline told a local reporter as she helped stock a shelter with supplies. "And we're stronger together." When the second wave of storms arrived Tuesday afternoon, they found communities transformed not just by destruction, but by determination. Emergency response was faster, coordination was smoother, people knew where to go and what to do. While the storms caused additional damage, not a single life was lost in the communities hit hardest on Saturday. Weather officials would later attribute this remarkable statistic not just to the slightly weaker nature of Tuesday's storms, but primarily to the heightened awareness and preparation of communities that had already experienced the worst. "People listened this time," Sarah Reeves of the National Weather Service explained. "When we issued warnings, there was no delay in response." "That saves lives." By the 1-week mark, the physical recovery had barely begun. Insurance adjusters moved through devastated neighborhoods. FEMA representatives helped residents navigate the complex web of disaster assistance. Utility crews worked around the clock to restore power and water. But a different kind of recovery was well underway. The restoration of community bonds that would ultimately prove stronger than any tornado. In Jackson County, Georgia, farmers from 3 counties arrived at David Morton's cotton field with tractors and equipment. While Eliza and Tyler recovered in the hospital, their neighbors planted the cotton crop David had been preparing for when the tornado hit. Eliza watched from her hospital window as a procession of tractors moved methodically across the field that had been in her husband's family for generations. Each machine represented a family, a neighbor, a friend, people who had set aside their own recovery work to ensure that the Morton legacy continued. "Your daddy would be proud," she whispered to Tyler, who slept fitfully in the hospital bed beside hers, his broken arm in a cast decorated with dinosaur stickers by the nurses. Leading the planting effort was Samuel Green, whose own farm had suffered only minor damage. As president of the Jackson County Farm Bureau, he had organized similar efforts after previous disasters, but this one felt different, more personal, more urgent. "David was always first to help others," he told reporters who covered the event. "Always brought his tractor when someone was sick or injured. We're just returning the favor." The cotton planting became symbolic of the broader recovery, a statement that life would continue, that the seasonal rhythms of planting and harvest would persist despite the interruption of disaster. "He'd have done the same for any of us," said a farmer who had driven his tractor 40 miles to help. "That's just how it works around here." In Huntsville, the high school graduation ceremony proceeded as scheduled, though moved to the football field with borrowed chairs from 6 surrounding counties. When Principal Thomas awarded Caroline Mitchell a special recognition for her actions during the tornado, the entire crowd of 2,000 rose in a standing ovation. "We talk about teachable moments in education," the principal said. "Ms. Mitchell taught our entire community about courage under the most extreme pressure. She embodied what we mean when we say, 'Huntsville strong.'" Caroline, uncomfortable with the attention, used her moment at the microphone to redirect the focus. "Every person in that shelter made the choice to remain calm and help others," she said. "That's the miracle here. Not just that we survived, but how we survived. Together. Among the graduates was Layla Washington, whose family home had been completely destroyed. She crossed the stage in a borrowed cap and gown, her valedictorian medal catching the setting sunlight. Her speech, rewritten in the wake of the disaster, captured the conflicting emotions of the moment. "We're celebrating amid rubble," she acknowledged, laughing through tears, finding joy in the midst of loss. That's not contradiction. That's courage. 1 month after the outbreak, as summer heat settled over the southeast, signs of both destruction and recovery remained visible across the landscape. Blue tops still covered thousands of roofs. Construction crews worked from dawn until dusk. Debris piles lined rural roads. The physical recovery would take years, perhaps decades, in some areas. But other recoveries were well underway. Community bonds had strengthened, emergency plans had improved. Neighbors who had never spoken now shared meals regularly. In Atlanta, researchers at the Weather Prediction Center were already studying the May outbreak to improve forecast models. The unusual intensification pattern and rapid development of the storm system had challenged existing predictions. Lead meteorologist Dr. Alan Shepard had requested funding for advanced radar systems that might provide precious additional minutes of warning time in future outbreaks. "Minutes matter," he explained to congressional staffers touring the facility. "Even 3 minutes of additional warning time could reduce casualties by 15%. That's the difference between life and death." In Washington, lawmakers from affected states were pushing for increased funding for early warning systems in rural areas. Senator Robert Caldwell, transformed by his experiences during the recovery efforts, had become an unexpected advocate for tornado shelter funding. "I was wrong," he admitted during a committee hearing. "I believed this was a matter of personal responsibility. What I've learned is that while preparation is indeed personal, safety infrastructure must be communal. Not everyone has the resources to prepare individually." His proposed legislation, the Safe Communities Act, would provide matching funds for tornado shelters in vulnerable areas, with priority given to mobile home communities, schools, and rural gathering places. And in countless homes across the region, families were having difficult but necessary conversations about preparation and safety. The Walters family in Cullman had expanded their storm shelter and stocked it with 2 weeks of supplies. Michael had helped dozens of neighbors install simple but effective safe rooms in their homes. "We can't control when disaster strikes," he told a community meeting in early June. "But we can control how prepared we are to face it and how we support each other afterward." His words resonated with Amir Khan, the software engineer who had considered leaving Cullman before the tornado. Amir had found not just neighbors through the disaster, but friends and a sense of belonging he'd never experienced in Chicago. "I'm staying," he told Michael after the meeting. "And I want to help build something permanent. A community center maybe that can double as a storm shelter." Michael grinned, clapping the younger man on the shoulder. "I know just the spot, and I know a lot of folks who'd help build it." Across the region, similar projects were taking shape. Community-driven initiatives to build safer, more connected neighborhoods. Churches were installing reinforced gathering spaces. Schools were upgrading their shelter areas. Neighborhoods were establishing communication networks that wouldn't rely on cellular infrastructure. In Griffin, Georgia, Zoe Anderson's mapping tool had evolved into a permanent community resource platform. With support from technology companies and a small grant from FEMA, ZoeHelps.org was being adapted for use nationwide, ready to deploy in any disaster zone. Zoe herself, though still living in her grandmother's house while their own home was rebuilt, had found purpose through the project. Her college plans had solidified. Georgia Tech had offered her early admission and a full scholarship after learning of her initiative. "I lost my home," she told her computer science club during their end-of-year meeting. "But I found my calling." As another summer storm built on the horizon, just an ordinary thunderstorm this time, Michael Walters stood on his porch and watched the clouds gather. The air felt different now, weighted not just with humidity, but with knowledge. The Southeast had always been resilient. Now it was becoming truly prepared. "Weather's coming," Rebecca said, joining him on the porch. Michael nodded. "It always is, but so are better days." Together they watched the approaching storm, not with fear, but with respect, and with the quiet confidence of those who have faced nature's worst and emerged stronger for it. In communities across Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas, similar scenes played out, people pausing to watch the approaching weather with newfound awareness. The storms of May 2025 had changed them, individually and collectively. They had learned, adapted, and committed to a future where weather would remain unpredictable, but their response to it would not. And in emergency operations centers throughout the region, meteorologists like Sarah Reeves continued their vigilant monitoring, knowing that somewhere, sometime, another outbreak would form. But when it did, more people would be ready, more lives would be saved, and more communities would recover, together.